This is a hybrid meeting of the City Council. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8, the city's website, and YouTube. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091 *.
Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091 #.
Thank you. The city clerk is the host of the Zoom meeting. Speakers will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. We have 3 presentations this evening. First up is the concrete flatwork replacement and repair program update. We'll invite Brent Soderlin, city engineer, to give the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Tonight, I'm actually going to have Mike McGoldrick, our Capital Improvement Projects Manager, give the presentation for the concrete flatwork. He's been with the city about a year now, so I'm going to turn it over to Mike to give the presentation.
Thank you, Brent. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to be here. Looking forward to this. Hope you guys are. So the first presentation I have tonight is regarding the concrete flatwork program, which is our annual program to replace, repair, and extend our concrete flatwork, such as curb and gutter, sidewalk, handicap ramps, and such. The purpose of the program is to repair or replace those that are damaged, curb, gutter, sidewalk, concrete panels, and to maintain the public infrastructure and to improve the community appearance by repairing and replacing broken concrete. I'm one slide ahead, sorry about that. I will go through the purpose and need, the overall project goals, recommendations, funding, and next steps. So the purpose, as I just said, is an annual maintenance project to repair or replace damaged curb, gutter, sidewalk, concrete panels, and concrete crosspans. And the goal is to maintain the public infrastructure and to improve community appearance by repairing and replacing the broken concrete. The city is responsible for the maintenance and improvements of the concrete flatwork in the public rights of way. So we look to do that and keep that maintained. We also look to coordinate this with the pavement management program, which we'll be discussing next, so that if we're doing a mill and overlay project, we coordinate the curb and gutter sidewalk improvements with that. Some of the concrete that we're repairing has been identified through our CRM system as well, and we're looking to replace the damaged concrete street panels. As well, we're looking to construct missing sidewalks to improve pedestrian connections. So areas where we don't have sidewalks constructed, we look to add new sidewalk. The map you see here is of the city with indications of the improvements we're looking to do, the repair we're looking to do, color-coded by the type of repair. You can see there's a fair amount down in the core city area, and there's some up in Reunion, Bell Creek, and what have you. I will go through those area by area. So this is the recommendations we have for the concrete flatwork in the core city. Feel free to stop me with any questions if you have. I will probably go through these. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but we're doing a fair amount in this location. And we've estimated the cost for each of those repairs and show also what fund it's coming from. And this sums up first those that are shown in the core city with a total estimated cost in that area that I showed earlier of about $72,000. Here in the Adams City area, we're looking at a fair amount between 70th and 72nd in the Birch, Cherry, Ash area. In summing these up, total cost is about $115,000 in this area, mostly funded through the Concrete Flatwork Fund, with some coming from Core City Infrastructure. Have some improvements in the Derby area. Totaling about $26,000. Along Quebec Parkway, we have a fair amount of median repairs to do. Total in that is about $56,000. Near Fairfax Park and up along 72nd Avenue, that totals just short of $19,000. One in Buffalo Run East, River Run, Turnberry area, a few there. Frontera Village, there's a fair number in that neighborhood. About $27,000. We're along the Reunion area. Buffalo Highlands, we have a couple. Bell Creek. And then the one recommendation we have for a sidewalk connection is along Peoria Street, between about, I guess that's about 115th, 114th area. As you probably know, there's a gap in the sidewalk on the west side of Peoria in that location. So we'd like to connect the dots there. We've estimated that to be about a $74,000 project. We'll need to put curb and gutter in there as well. So totaling that, all those areas, including the sidewalk connectivity, we've estimated cost about $418,000. And I should point out at this point that those cost estimates are based on last year's prices and escalated by a few percent. As you probably know, there's been a fair amount of inflation in some of these, so we're hopeful that we're pretty close. But these are just based on the costs that we've put together. We've added a contingency onto that, which comes to $83,000, so the total estimated cost is just over $500,000. And this is summed up a little separately based on the type of work and the funds it's coming from. Concrete Flatwork, $216, Core City, $127, missing sidewalks from $74,000. Again, with contingency, that comes to just over $500,000. The available funding sources we're looking to are the Concrete Flatwork budget, which we have $250,000, the sidewalk connectivity budget of $96,000, and then we're looking at the Core City Infrastructure for about $164,000. The total budget in that fund is $250,000, and we're looking to use the remainder of that in the pavement management program that we'll be talking about in a little bit. So the next steps would be to advertise a request for bid for the Concrete Flatwork program, which, as you see, we put our list together. So assuming this is okay, we'll be moving forward with that, putting out an RFP here in the next several weeks, hoping to bring a contract to the City Council in May so we can begin work in June. So that is my summary of the Concrete Flatwork. Are there any questions?
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that presentation. Does anybody on council have any questions? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you for that. I have a question about the Core City and the area going down Brighton Road north of Suncor and south of 60-something. Has there been any thought about doing any work on sidewalks or even putting in sidewalks in that area or any curb and gutter work there?
We don't have that in our program as we stand, Councilwoman, as you can tell from our program. We have not had discussions that I've been a party to add sidewalks
Yes, Councilwoman Noble, most of Brighton Boulevard is actually a CDOT highway, and so it's not actually part of the city program.
That's good to know. I was driving that area with a bunch of people on Friday, which I'll talk about later, but it was pointed out that it was Commerce City, and I was then very concerned that we weren't doing our job down there. Where does it switch at Brighton Road?
I actually don't think Brighton Road actually becomes part of the city until right around 104th Avenue. I think most of the Brighton Boulevard in the core city is CDOT highway.
Very interesting. Thank you for that information. We need to have a chat with CDOT then. Thank you.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, thanks. Just to piggyback on that, Highway 224, which is 72nd Avenue, 74th Avenue would be, is also CDOT all the way up, and that's why there's no infrastructure. But I agree with you. I think we need to talk to CDOT. My question is about Peoria Street and that house that does not have curb and gutter in front of it. At the time of that development, we didn't have that right of way. It was still unincorporated, that particular property, and it has a ditch in front of it. So I don't know if we have acquired the right of way so we can put the sidewalk so it lines up with the rest of the sidewalk for drainage reasons, or if it's going to stick out in front of that lot.
We have not acquired the right-of-way to have the same typical section as the rest of Peoria, so we cannot continue the sidewalk on the same alignment. So our plan would have it stick out, as you said, so be closer to the roadway, but with curb and gutter and a sidewalk, we feel it will be a safe connection.
Well, I get that. We'll have a safe place for people to walk. However, the downside is we jack up the drainage when you stick that sidewalk out of alignment. What is the reason not to go after condemnation to acquire that right-of-way before we put the improvements in, so that we're not putting the improvements in front of having the right-of-way? Because once we acquire the right-of-way, we're going to have to tear it out and redo the sidewalk because of drainage issues. And if you have those corners on that sidewalk, we know ponding is going to be created there, which is going to deteriorate the sidewalk, and it's going to not have the life it should have. So have we explored condemnation and getting that right away to be able to align the drainage and the safety of the path in the best manner possible?
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilmember Ford. So we have not explored condemnation of that piece of property. What we're trying to do is, get a safe place for folks to walk. Obviously, that property is in unincorporated Adams County, and, they have that fence there, right? So if we pursued buying the right-of-way, I think it would probably use up our entire budget for our sidewalk connectivity. So, we could consider a larger project if you'd like.
Well, I think what my concern is that if we do the project the way it is without the right-of-way, it's going to be a temporary fix. Is there not, you're talking $74,000. Could we not go ahead, like we have done in other places for a temporary solution, do with a scenario where you have debris or something different other than concrete for temporary? And then my suggestion would be that we talk to the county and try to get them on the same page. We have to utilize those partnerships because I hate spending $74,000 knowing that it's going to be very temporary, and it will dam up the gutter pan for drainage, and maybe even a worse solution from the aspect of creating a damming issue on the drainage. If the ditch is already there and we went with some kind of a grading scenario and some breeze or gravel, some form of a path for safety, but to put $74,000 into concrete in front of a house that's in unincorporated Adams that we don't have right away to keep it in alignment with our other sidewalks, I think is kind of foolish. It's just my opinion.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank Thank you, Mayor. Kind of following along Councilmember Ford's questioning, I don't think you said this, but is that the only property on that road that's not annexed into the city?
There's two.
The rest of them are? Was there a discussion about annexing that property in so that we might have the option to have a little more control over how that project goes?
Well, we haven't had any discussions about annexing that property in, and I guess I'm not sure if we can force annexation or not.
Yeah, there's 1/6 continuity there. You can-
So to answer that question, no, we haven't had active conversations about annexation. However, if it is classified as an enclave where we have, I'll call it, enclosed the property of questions or properties of question for more than 3 years, I suspect obviously we have, then we have the ability to take forceful annexation, and that's just light, fair words, but forceful annexation of that property into our incorporated boundaries. I will say that this is something that, on a much larger, broader scale, we at the city staff level, management-wise, are looking at from a much more proactive, progressive annexation strategy, and this may fall well within that, but we haven't had anything directly with the property owners per se.
I would just follow up by saying, I'd hate to see us spend the money, like Councilmember Ford was saying, to piecemeal this in if that's a property that it makes sense to annex, and then we might have a better solution long-term. So I'd like to see if there's any other feedback on that from council.
What we can do is explore maybe a different area that's missing sidewalk and come forward with that project instead of doing the one that we've picked.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll move on to pavement management.
All right, thank you. This, the second presentation I have tonight is regarding the pavement management program recommendations. Pavement management, similar to concrete, is also a annual program we have to maintain our asphalt pavement assets. So I'll go through purpose and need. I'll go through some of the principles of pavement maintenance, the types, the process, the condition ranges, types and condition, methodology, and recommendations we've made for this year's program. The purpose is to preserve and extend the useful life of paved surfaces throughout the city and optimize the available funds to meet the roadway network condition needs. This is to maximize performance and safety standards of the city roadways, so to minimize overall long-term costs of the roadway system. So the principles of pavement maintenance is that repairing streets when still in fair condition or relatively good condition is ultimately cost less than waiting until they have fallen into poor condition. Delaying it until it's too far down the curve there costs significantly more than it does to repair them earlier on. So the goal here is to optimize our funds and therefore improve them at the better time. There are several maintenance types that we go through. One is routine maintenance, and that's usually planned or cyclical. It's reactive to problems in many cases, and it shows after a deficiency occurs in the pavement. So some of the examples of this are crack sealing, full depth crack repair, if there's a crack that we want to repair. There's joint sealing of concrete, potholes, and that sort of work. A second type of maintenance we call preventative, and this is performed to protect the existing pavement through surface treatments. It does extend the service life, but it does not add any structural strength. It's generally applied to pavements in good condition. Examples of this are slurry seal or chip seal or microsurfacing. Third type of maintenance we do is corrective, and that's reactive to roads that have fallen a little bit down the curve. It does extend the service life through structural enhancements. It's performed when deficiencies are significant and the preventative maintenance isn't as effective. It's more extensive and more expensive. Examples of that are mill and overlay or full depth reclamation, hot mix overlay. So the process we've gone through to develop our plan is we've identified all the roadways, physical characteristics, lengths, widths, that sort of thing, classifications. We've had a data collection field survey that was actually done in 2018 that investigated every segment of roadway throughout the city, looked at its condition with distress and the severity of it. And then that gave us a pavement condition index, or PCI, to represent its condition. And the PCI index is from 0 to 100, with the higher score being better. So these are the types of condition ranges we have, from 0 to 10, where it's failed, all the way up to 86 to 100, where there's really little maintenance needed at that point. This information is based on that 2018 analysis. Commerce City has 260.89 miles of paved roads. The majority of that, 250 miles, are asphalt, with the remainder being concrete. And the distribution of asphalt roads is by functional class here. We have the arterial or collector roads, about 94 miles. Local roads are about 156. So more miles, of course, of local, but the percentage is a little more even, since the arterial and collectors are often wider roads. And as you can see on the right column, we have the weighted PCI for those roads by the category. As I mentioned, we divided the roads into 2,861 sections and evaluated them based on the average PCI and current traffic volumes, roadway classifications, snow routes. Also coordinated such things as when the South Adams County is doing a water line replacement schedule, not wanting to repave a road, just to have it cut up for a new water line the next year. We did eliminate a couple roadways from the mill and overlay program because more extensive work is needed. So the goal has been to focus on roadways with a PCI less than 70. So that's where we focus. We have added a few streets with PCIs greater than 70 based upon either citizen concerns or our observations. Those include Quebec Parkway, which has a PCI of 83, but as you probably know, the joints between the asphalt have been deteriorating a little bit, so that is added on even though the PCI is greater. And we also show the example of Fairfax neighborhood, where water line replacement was completed and it's still in warranty, so we don't want to redo that one just yet. Most of the work is mill and overlay. We do have street reconstruction this year planned for Elm Street from 69th to 72nd and Dahlia Street from 69th to 70th. Dahlia Street is north of 70th as part of a Adams County project from 70th up to 72nd that we will be doing the Dahlia Street one from 69th to 70th independently. Crack repairs, which was one of the methods we mentioned earlier, that's really done continuously through our street maintenance department. They're going out there fixing potholes and repairing cracks when they appear, when they're necessary. We do have a contractor coming in to help them out here, hopefully starting the next few weeks, to do some additional crack repairs. That's not part of really what we're discussing tonight. So we have our list of recommendations here. Again, I'm not going to go through them one by one, but this is a list of the maintenance types, the street name, what stretch of that street we're doing, what the PCI is projected as of today, our cost for each item, and then the fund from which we plan to pay for it. And so that totaled just short of 2.5 million. With a contingency of 20%, it comes in just less than 3 million. I have a series of maps, which I'll flip through relatively quickly, to show you visually where we're looking to do this work. Locust Street between 49th and 50th. Claremont Street north of 60th. Other streets here, 60th and Grape Drive. 60th Place, Locust Street. In Ivanhoe. Few streets, as we saw in the map, of the concrete work over here north of 69th and between 69th and 70th, between Ash and Dahlia. Dahlia is shown in a different color, as that's the reconstruction rather than the mill and overlay. Here we show Elm Street also to be reconstructed, a few other streets adjacent to that area. Bax Court in the Derby area, and Quebec Parkway from 72nd north till its intersection with Highway 2. 88th Avenue, east and west of the Rosemary Street intersection. 12th Avenue. Streets. And then this is 96th Avenue. We did 96th west of Potomac last year. This year we're looking to do it east of Potomac over to Chambers. So the total cost, including the contingency in this case, comes to just under 3 million, with almost 2.6 being mill and overlay and a little over 400,000 being street reconstruction. The funding sources we're looking to pay for this come from our annual pavement management budget of 2.5 million. We do have a little over 4,000 left from last year. As I mentioned, a portion of the Core City infrastructure improvements is planned for this. The rest of it is planned for the concrete repair. And then we have our street reconstruction budget, which we have about $500,000 in. So that the total budget we have available is almost 3.1 million for the 3 million here. Again, the costs here are based on last year's prices. We don't have a bid yet, so we're not sure how accurate these will be. We did escalate them, but we're not sure if we escalated them quite the right amount. So as far as funding per area, we've divided it into what we've called Core City, Irondale, and Northern Range. As you can see, 2.4 million is in the Core City, so roughly 80% of that. A little over 100,000 in Irondale, which is primarily 88th Avenue, and then the Northern Range has a little short of $500,000. So the next steps would be to advertise a RFP for the pavement management program. Look for a contractor to do this. Then we would bring a contract back to City Council in May, so this work can begin in June as the concrete plan is. So that finishes my presentation. If we have any questions.
Anybody on council have any questions? I have two questions. Whenever you're doing the mill and overlay, are we also inspecting sidewalks in the adjacent areas?
We try to coordinate that so that we're doing concrete work. If we're doing repair of concrete work, it is coordinated with the pavement management. So we're not doing that, ripping up one to do the other the next year.
And does that include the installation of ADA compliant crosswalks at that intersection?
Yes, when we do the concrete, we do put an ADA compliant.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Douglas?
Yes, thank you. I've had citizens complain about where asphalt meets concrete and how it doesn't align well, so that it seems like there's a gap where people are driving over it and they feel like it's really jumping up and taking a beating on their cars. Is that anything that can be addressed, or is there some kind of answer that I can give these people who are complaining about that?
Well, that is always actually a challenge, the joint asphalt and concrete, other than continuing to work with the contractors, make sure that we have inspection there to make sure it's done well. There are often challenges with expansion of asphalt that has a different expansion than concrete, so it either leaves gaps or it pushes up against the concrete and creates a bit of a bump. But it's a maintenance issue.
So it's something that could be looked at, though, as far as maintenance?
Yeah. And if
The one
there's
that I've had a
specific-
complaint on is the one that's just north of Quebec on Highway 2, so you're headed north.
Mhm.
And it's really bad on the side that you're headed north,
The
so.
railroad tracks there, is that what you're?
No, it's on Highway 2. So when you're
Oh,
coming
okay,
from
I think I know.
Quebec and you're going up Highway 2, and it's like at the second street light that's there.
Okay.
And,
Well, we can certainly look at any locations.
all right, if you could, that would be great, because that's the one that I've had the most complaints on. So thank you.
Councilmember Ford.
I didn't notice on the roads that we're doing, but Derby had a lot of water line replacement, and I didn't notice that those roads were getting repaired at this time. Is that, are the roads within Derby, in front of the bank, Magnolia, there was a lot of those roads that were tore up with water line construction. Are any of those in there to be repaired? They're in pretty bad shape.
And some of that sort of coordinated with, we do have some of that scheduled for being repaired. Some also needs to be coordinated with the South Adams County, in that they have warranties for their work. I think Brent has probably a better answer for it.
Okay.
Yes, so Councilmember Ford, you'll notice that in the pavement management program, we're actually doing a few roads in the Fairfax neighborhood. And that water line work was actually done 2 years ago. And the water district actually has a 2-year warranty. So we try to coordinate that work 2 years after South Adams is done with their work, so that we can, I guess, basically clean up that neighborhood and make it look nice. So in 2 years, we'll be adding that Derby neighborhood into our program.
Great, that makes sense. All I would ask is that you look at it on a regular basis, make sure that we don't have settling, and because it is rough to drive on. So as long as we're staying on top of it and making South Adams. The other thing, I think that's probably a good protocol, because you can make sure that it has settled properly and everything else before you go putting the road in there. As long as we stay on top of them for the warranty work, I'm good with that.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you again for your presentation. We'll move on to our third presentation, which is a discussion on the 2K bonds. We'll invite Roger Tinklenberg, City Manager, to give the presentation.
Oh, you already have it.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. What I have up is the spreadsheet that shows the projects. In this particular spreadsheet, I had tested a number of combinations to see what would bring us to approximately $37 million. So the question for you tonight is, what projects do you want to include in that bond funding? Let me give you a little more introduction. So the roadway projects were ranked by Public Works. You'll notice the first one, 120th Avenue, we already have that one funded, so that's why I did not put it into the mix. 88th Avenue is a large project, needs $24 million. That was the second-ranked project for Public Works. And then Chambers Road, 106th to 112th, that's been subject of recent discussion. That would be a joint project with the Reunion Metro District. The 8.7 million would be the city's share. Also, 96th Avenue, Tower to Buckley was ranked quite high, and that's 5.1 million. That would widen it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. And then High Plains Parkway does not exist yet. It needs to be built at some point, and that would take it from 104th to 120th, and that totals 22.24 million. 112th Avenue, Parkside to Tower Road also was ranked quite high. That would be 8.06 million. And then 96th Avenue, Chambers to Eagle Creek Parkway, 21.5 million. So that gives you a flavor of, the type of projects. Parks and Trails were not ranked in terms of any type of priority order, but there's been a significant amount of discussion about Second Creek Farms Neighborhood Park, as well as the Bison Ridge Neighborhood Park around the Bison Ridge Recreation Center. We also have a cost estimate to expand the Buffalo Run Golf Course for the clubhouse expansion. And then in the southern part of the city, Monaco Park renovation, Phase 2. Phase 1 is already funded. There's also a number of irrigation replacement projects. There's the Eagle Point Recreation Center kitchen remodel that was not able to be included in the original 2K package where we expanded and remodeled that recreation center. And then small little projects, fitness stations on the perimeter trail around the wildlife refuge. Also, another item that was fairly high on their list was the 67th Place Highway 2 underpass under the railroad track to improve that whole crossing. So that gives you, again, flavor of projects. And as I said, I tried to combine those to come out to a total of about 37. It's about $37.33 million. The one option I included in the council packet was this option 8, which came to $37,435,000.
Roger, are these, so the costs of all these, there's a couple projects on there that I feel like we likely have partnerships in order for those. 112th, when you talk about Parkside to Tower, being the north side of that is the county. Is that price tag what we owe, what we would be responsible for? Is that all inclusive where the county may come back with a piece of that? I just want to make sure that the number that we're looking at is just what we're on the hook for.
I'll call on the city engineer.
Yes, so Councilmember Hurst, those numbers actually came out of result of our road impact fee study. And so we had our cost per mile that Michael Baker had put together for us. And so that's where those costs came from.
So it doesn't account for, like, say it's an $8.5 million project, and the county might owe $2 million. Is that baked in there, or is that we'll take the $2 million back after the, and I'm just using
Sure,
made up numbers.
it's
but-
not baked into the number right now.
Okay, so it's kind of the whole picture, and then we'll have have to go and work with the county on what the actual number is.
Yeah, these are really just big picture planning numbers is what I would say.
Understand. That's what I guess I should have just asked that question if we were clearing that up. All right, that's all I needed to know. Thanks.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you, Mayor Huseman. This is really, it's not only difficult to see on the screen, it's difficult to see on our laptops. I have a couple of questions. Follow-up to the question that Mr. Hurst, Councilmember Hurst, posed about 112th. My understanding in reading the Consolidated Development Agreement is that Reunion Metro District is responsible for perimeter roads. And so I have spoken to this city attorney about a legal opinion on that because that's my reading of the CDA. Have you taken a look at that? That would be from Parkside to Buckley. There's homes there and have been there for at least 3 years, and they have dirt road behind them.
So thank you, Councilmember Noble. I'll speak on behalf of staff. As it currently stands, there is no obligation as required for perimeter roads of Reunion Metro District and/or anyone associated with the Consolidated Development Agreement because the Consolidated Development Agreement is not in place.
Well, actually, didn't we vote for it to be in place for 6 months from December to June?
No,
we didn't?
ma'am.
Okay. But under the previous agreement, they were obligated. So my legal question, the legal opinion I'm seeking is whether that should have been accomplished within the 20 years of the CDA. And that it was not and should have been.
I'll get with community development after this meeting to find out more about that particular road and the obligations that might be applicable from the CDA or any other construction documents. I'll reach out to Brent and Joe in Public Works as well to see if there's anything there that was overlooked.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I have a question about the 96th and Buckley Park that you're showing on the spreadsheet. And you have that called out at $20 million. Could you tell me why it's so high?
The Buckley, the Second Creek Farms Neighborhood Park, ma'am?
No, 96 in Buckley. That would be the next.
Yeah, I think that's 5.1 million, Councilwoman Noble, I think.
I
I'm
saw
looking
it, not on this page.
Please go to the Parks and Trails tab.
It's on page 1. Okay, in the first block, you can see it. It's the last item in the first block. And it says designed a $20 million. That seems excessive unless we're including the 4 lanes of 96th Street into it. All the people are seeking is a park.
So the Buckley Community Park, as it currently stands, which is within the Reunion PUD zone document as parcel 10L, I believe, is 65 acres. So on a relative scale, as we're talking about a 10-acre park being 4 million, there were some, I would say, scalability and rough estimation by our staff on the going cost for that regional park, which could include a number of different improvements from an amphitheater to ball fields to various play courts, which is why you're seeing this estimate of 20 million.
All right, then in that case, this is very disappointing to see this since we've heard from innumerable residents of that area who had an expectation and a hope for a park that would make up for the decisions that were made by the city a few years ago in 2013. A very minor expense would be required to put a park at the end of Second Creek Trail, and it would be nowhere near the $20 million. There's a whole community of people on the other side of the highway, on the south side, who have an expectation for a park, and I don't think it's unreasonable in any way, shape, or form. We've had this discussion before, and my sense was that the city council members all felt that it was reasonable, that their request was reasonable.
Mr. Rogers?
Thank you for that, ma'am. I'd like to call out on the screen, row number 4, the Second Creek Farms Neighborhood Park. Is that park in question as that you were bringing up from
No, it isn't.
2013?
It isn't. That park is at 88. That's 8 blocks away. And you can't get to it from Buffalo Highlands because of all the construction and so forth. It's down at the edge by the industrial area. It's at the very south end of this huge area that will have Second Creek Farms and Buffalo Highlands. It's very far away. That's where the school's going to be. This is up by 96th and Buckley.
So this is a neighborhood park that was planned for that square mile, I would call it that. So between 88th Avenue and 96th Avenue, Second Creek Farms Neighborhood Park is the designated park site for that area. If you want, a different park, this is the big park that would be in conjunction with the high school, eventual construction of the high school north of 96th Avenue. So that's the difference between the two. But this one here is the neighborhood park that was designated and planned for that area.
And that
Well,
would
you
be
and
a-
I had a conversation about this on Thursday during our meeting, and it would be at the end of Second Creek Trail, which would give people an opportunity to get some shade and relax and so forth, and would be for use of the entire community, not just Buffalo Highlands.
Yeah, so I would suggest that that would be the equivalent of this neighborhood park. Again, depending on all of the amenities that you would place in it. So it would be probably less than this $4 million, but it's still going to approach that number, just given if you're talking shelters, play structures, that type of thing, you're into this ballpark, so to speak, of this cost.
Or it could be less.
Yeah.
This one is 10 acres. I don't know if you're talking 10 acres. I don't think it looks like 10 acres. It looks like maybe 2.
Keep in mind, a small park of that nature, we could build out of our regular program, not necessarily having to use the bond funds. So again, it comes back to priority for council.
All right, then I'm going to make certain that that is on that list and high on that list, because having driven that area many times now, it just makes such total sense. And the fact that the park disappeared in 2013 during the planning process, when it existed at one point, is disappointing not only to the residents, but to me as well.
Well, keep in mind, that was the private park. It was not the HOA park. It was not the city's park. The city's park has always been this
Yes.
Second Creek Farms.
That would be true. And yet it was the city that agreed to the change, and it was the trade-off for the 96th Street Bridge that allowed the that HOA park or whatever it was going to be to disappear. It also was on either side of Telluride. Half of it was in Second Creek Farms and half of it was in Buffalo Highlands. I hope that, that we can revisit this so that this park can be taken care of through other funds. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurst.
I think that's a good discussion. I had the feeling that we were going to fund that through our normal program too. We were going to prioritize that in our budget because it wasn't going to be as expensive as these. But that was my kind of going back to my question on these numbers. I completely get that it takes months to sharpen your pencil on estimates that are this far out. You know, when you're looking at 60 acres, you're just kind of, you know, using math to get to that point. But when we're talking about that bigger park at the high school, and that's a pretty large number at 20 million, doesn't the school district have to fund pieces of that, right? Like, I know if there's going to be baseball fields there for the high school baseball team, maybe we do fund 25 or 30% of that so we could have access to it, or 50% so we have access as a community. But those things will be eventually worked out, negotiated, and the cost to us will be likely different than what's up there, correct?
That's correct. That's all in full freight. You do bring up a very good point. We are engaged with the school district, having open conversations with them as it relates to the development of that high school site, as you all are aware. That passed on bond this past November, in which now they are actively wanting to move forward. And in support of that high school, they would like to enter into a joint use with the city. Now, what that means, what they're able to help fund, design, build, we're going to have to work through. So that 20 million will ultimately come down. And as we enter into a kind of a community engagement with our residents about what else would you like to see out on that community park, we'll be able to have that finer tooth comb as it relates to the cost.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Since I've been on City Council, I've continuously requested, and don't seem to see it anywhere, but the request for some bike lanes in the core of the city. So why can't that be added on here somewhere, like on the core streets of the city in the south area?
Yes, so thank you for that question. So what we're trying to pursue is CDOT and Dr. Cog have a program called Safer Main Streets, and we've actually applied for a grant on 68th Avenue between Colorado and Brighton to actually add expanded sidewalks, and I don't know if there'll be bike lanes on that particular road, but in the core city, there's going to be grant releases. I think they're $150K every quarter, I believe. And we're going to try to apply for those kind of grant applications to do bike lanes and that kind of stuff in the core city, instead of using the 2K money for that.
Okay, and when is that supposed to take place?
Well, the release of the grants is every quarter this year, so we'll start applying for grant opportunities this year.
Okay. Okay, and then a few other questions. As it mentions Pioneer Park, but in the Paradise Island, but at one time I thought we mentioned, has staff looked into exploring more cameras and lights also for the whole park and not just I realized Paradise Island had some burglary, but what about the whole park?
So I'll have to get back to you on lighting for the parks.
Okay, because I know we discussed that previously for the safety, especially with the incidents that occurred last year. And then another question, the 62nd and Vasquez project, I had some questions because under the council communication, it said the Mile High Greyhound Park redevelopment project will not generate enough tax increment financing to fund this project for several years, and the project needs to be built sooner. Once the redevelopment project generates enough TIF, then the city can be repaid the $2 million for use on another project. So my question is, will the city get the $2 million back at one time, and does the or does it have to be fully developed, or will we get this back in periods of time?
So that's a good question, ma'am. As it relates to the dog track, you would get that back in periods of time. Over the lifespan of the project, it will generate TIF on an annual basis. So with respect to paying back that $2 million, there will be an attributable share that will go back to that $2 million so that it can be reinvested into the community-wide.
And is this in writing somewhere for the city?
It is our hope to be able to bring that cooperation agreement between the city and the Urban Renewal Authority at a future time, here in the near future, excuse me.
Because just with so many issues that have gone on, you know, you said a future time, but can this be brought back to the mayor and council to make sure this is followed up so there's no more unfortunate occurrences with the Mile High Greyhound Park? Can this come back to us and let us know there is something in writing, so when something comes up later and I'm not on council and the mayor and fellow council members, it's not another big, it didn't happen?
So to that, yes. The formal process of what we will have to engage is, like I said, a cooperation agreement between the two entities, that being the Urban Renewal Authority and the city, that will outline the, for lack of better words, reimbursement of that $2 million back to the city over the period of that remaining life of TIF, so that that can be reinvested. So you will be taking a formal action as a council, but ultimately as well as you are sitting as the Urban Renewal Authority Board as well. So that will come back before you, and our intent is to bring that to you all Q2 of this year.
Okay, so it will come back this year then, and it will be, like you said, presented in writing also?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's all I had.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. I see 120th on here a number of times, 76 to Buckley. And I just wanted to clarify, is that the same project that we've been talking about, or is that additional improvements to 120th?
It's the same project, ma'am.
So my understanding was those funds have already been allocated from another part of our budget, and so I'm just curious why they're showing up in this.
Just to present just another option for you, whether or not you wanted to still fund it under the other sources of monies, versus if you wanted to use the 2K, which would then free up that source to be reapplied elsewhere. So it's kind of a either or, whether how you would like to choose to move that forward.
Right, but we can fund it either way.
Correct, ma'am.
And then regarding these estimates where, because my understanding is the 120th estimate is our portion only as a city, correct? We already know that.
Yes, ma'am.
But some of these other projects are all in until we get reimbursements from whatever other entity, Adams County, the district, school district, whoever. What happens then when we get reimbursements on 2K funds? Because the way I understood the explanation of how we can use bond money is it has to be applied in this manner in a certain period of time. So what happens to the reimbursements?
The reimbursement basically goes back into the capital improvement program budget. So it becomes like the rest of the money, basically available for any other project.
Okay, that's interesting. I was just curious. I figured it would have to be spent just the same up front, or there would be penalties as described at the retreat.
No, ma'am. As long as it's spent on the intended use originally, if we receive a reimbursement, that can go back into the capital improvement program.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ford.
You know, I think all these are great projects. One that I don't see up there, and there's not a lot up there in the core part of the city. I would love to see the numbers on doing the median landscape improvements between 72nd and Highway 2 on Quebec Street. I think our residents deserve to see that area spruced up a little bit.
So, I see Monaco Park Phase 2. What is that? Because I thought we were doing Monaco Park already.
So Monaco Park, the initial project takes care of several items. There's a shelter replacement and that type of thing. Phase 2 would include building, I'm working off of memory here, so Jason may be able to clean it up after me. As I recall, the Phase 2 puts another shelter and play structure towards the south end of the park and also replaces the basketball court.
That's my recollection as well, Roger.
Yeah, I guess, because there's a couple of things on here, like, the other one too was the Eagle Point Rec Center where, we basically didn't finish that entire project. So for me, I'd like to see those finished because I don't know of anywhere else where we would do something, piecemeal like that and then, not have a plan for the second part of that project to complete it. So I would like to see the rec center and Monaco Park included. I feel like they're kind of low-hanging fruits that, they're easy wins that we can put in this program. It's hard to pick just one combination because, a lot of these combinations do still seem a little bit skewed. And so I guess I would like to know more behind the reasoning for these combinations and what we see as the benefit to the city as a whole, in this package for 1 through 8. Are they ranked in the order of priority or?
The road projects were, but as I mentioned earlier, the Parks Recreation projects were not rank ordered. The Eagle Point kitchen remodel, yes, it's piecemeal from the standpoint that we didn't think there was enough money available at the time of doing the expansion and remodel of Eagle Point. So that's why that project did not make it into the final cut. But this would take care of it. In terms of the contingent projects, for example, this option 8 that I have on the screen right now, we listed Monaco Park as the first item as a contingent project. And the reason we did that, we anticipate that we'll be able to obtain grant funds for the other 2 parks that are shown there, either Second Creek Farms or Bison Ridge Park. So that's what would make it possible to do the contingent projects. And then we also have some additional money yet that's available from the first round. And so that's why I'm not too concerned with keeping it exactly at 37 million. We can add in, as needed. The reason I didn't include them in the list is we have to commit to spending the 37 million in the next 3 years. The other money is available for use basically at any time. So we would supplement these with that money as needed.
Okay, I do like that option 8, especially if, you're telling me that we can get those contingent projects funded through other means.
Councilmember Noble?
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Madera that finishing some of these projects makes a lot of sense. I am confused with the layout. You show 37,179,000, and there is a list of certain things under that. And then the next bunch is 7.7 million, why, oh, those are south, but that total then is 44 million, and that isn't the amount of money we have available to us under the bond, correct? If we expand the bond? Is it 44 million?
43 million, yes.
43 million? Okay, and this is more than 43 million, so you're wanting us to choose something to take out?
Again, I was just giving you an illustration of, a different combination of projects, basically.
Okay. I would start by taking out Buckley Community Park for now because there are parks south of 96th. There are parks in Frontera and there are parks in South Lawn. There is nothing to the north, however. I do think that Second Creek Trail can be expanded to the south. And you could raise that to 2 million, and that would solve a problem. We don't have enough information on Buckley Community Park, as Councilmember Hurst pointed out.
If I may ask, or if I may suggest, Roger, it may be helpful if we're able to pull up a map and kind of just show generally where the Buckley Community Park and the Second Creek Farm Park, and maybe, ma'am, you can help us just kind of dial in where you're looking or thinking about the extension of the Second Creek Trail.
Do one of you know how to do this on this system? I don't.
Do you mind if I ask a supporting question?
No.
Sir, if I could ask a supporting question, I think one of the things that I'm hung up on the contingent projects is we discussed there's likely money inside some of these projects where we'll get Adams County partnership, school district partnership. So we're looking at 37 million up there if we select option 8 for the sake of argument. You had those 2 contingent projects that Oscar brought up that were a good point, good call outs. If we commit to the projects listed in option 8, but there's enough room after we sign our agreements with the county and the school district to build those 2 contingents, because we didn't commit to them now, does that exclude them from using that original 37 million, or does that allow us to work them into, since we put them on the list?
You can come back later and amend this resolution with a new resolution.
So that changes a lot for me, because what I was worried about is that we're committing to option 8, and I'm just for the sake of argument. And those contingents not being in that list would then be excluded because they weren't on the list. That's kind of how I read it. And so you're saying if we commit to option 8, those 2 contingents that are listed that we feel should probably be prioritized, as soon as we say, okay, Chambers isn't a full 8 million to the city, 112 isn't a full 8 million, it's 5.5. There's your cost savings that you needed to be able to cover the 2 contingent projects. And we can get those done and kind of move them up quickly. Am I right, just in that kind of justification of thinking?
Yes.
Appreciate it. That clears it up for me. Thank you.
All right, could you put the map up again, please?
Councilmember Grimes?
And what were you,
She wasn't finished.
he wanted to ask a question within my question.
I didn't know either.
We fall apart at the seams when you leave the room. Okay.
So this would be the area of the high school and Buckley Park.
And and then the other one, 88th?
Yes, that's right in this area here.
It's not on 88th, it's,
Correct. It's by this, it's called Grandma Gulch. It runs from Tower Road down to Second Creek, right through this area. That's why there's an open spot here. And so that park would be located right in this area.
That's
And-
also considered a joint elementary slash school, elementary slash park site.
yes, and I am a little concerned about that because I have that situation across from me at Landmark Academy, and the public doesn't really use the school property, so it doesn't quite work that way. Because they wind up using the extra land themselves for things that they'll need. 10 acres isn't very much for a school, according to what the superintendent told us a year or two ago. How will people get from south of 96 to north of 96 if they wanted to go to the large park, since there's going to be a 4-lane highway?
There's a underpass right here by Second Creek. That's the Second Creek Trail.
The dirt, the natural dirt area you're talking about is how you want people going back and forth, the kids going back and forth?
There's a trail down from Buffalo Highlands right through this area, and it crosses over Second Creek, no, it's adjacent to Second Creek, and then the trail goes under 96th Avenue.
I believe if you scroll in, Roger, I think the trail is visible on the map.
It is gravel, though, on the trail. It's not a normal sidewalk for people if you're going to be clearing it off in order for people to get through on the snow.
Yeah, this part here is concrete, and then it's soft surface elsewhere, you're correct.
To get down to it, though, is an embankment. It's not a normal pathway down. I just don't know that that's a solution, and I hope that we can come back and expand Second Creek Trail to the south so that this can be resolved. There is, as I noted, a lot of park space by comparison north of 96th. And there will be significantly more with the Buckley Community Park, but not to the south. I'm just concerned because we're all being asked to pay for this. This extends the 1% instead of paying off the 1%. It extends it, it adds to it, so that we're all paying, all of the community is paying it. And I just want everybody to be able to take advantage, same as making use of the areas that Councilmember Madera talked about in the south, but also making good use of areas in North Commerce City as well.
Mayor Pro Tem?
And also Councilman, and Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas, good points as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just wanted to go back to staff with the bike lanes, because you mentioned the grants. What if we don't get any of the grants? Then where is the money going to come from if we don't get approved for the grants?
If we don't get approved for the grants, we'd have to just take it out of the regular CIP program.
Because, it's frustrating. This is going on my 3rd year on city council, and I've been requesting bike lanes and a stop sign with the reflector lights on them. So I'm curious, too, can that be added in here somewhere for not only the south part of the city, but also the north. We've been continuously requesting the reflector stop signs as well for 3 years.
Some of those signs have been installed, and I know there's more on the list.
But can more be added on to this list with this funding as well?
We would, it can be, but it's tough to fund small items like that out of something like this. You really want to keep it to large capital projects. So those type of signs are being incorporated into the Public Works normal operating budget.
Okay, because even, especially due to the safety of, preventing fatal accidents, and especially if you just said they're small, then can we get a whole bunch in the north and south to prevent accidents before they actually happen? Because it just seems like, this is an ongoing concern, and it, like I said, I can't stress again, it seems like out of that 37 million, most of it isn't going anywhere, hardly to anywhere parts of the south part of in my opinion, to the south part of the city or the core of the city. And, stop signs to me, especially if they're not that expensive, then I think that should be added to this as well to prevent auto accidents.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I think we should have that discussion out of our normal budget too, because my personal opinion, we're not going to win very many grants for bike lanes in the south because of the width of the lanes. We would have to remove parking spots in front of people's houses, which is possible. It's just not going to be a very fun conversation. And so I think we're probably not going to get the approval and going to have to force it on our own.
We attempted to install bike lanes on 60th Avenue when 60th Avenue was repaved. I want to say about 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever that happened. And we got huge amount of pushback from people living on 60th Avenue, and that's why you don't see bike lanes there. You'll see parking areas that are delineated by paint, paint stripes. But it's tough, as Councilmember Hurst mentioned.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the Buckley Park, the $20 million estimate, we know that's probably a gross overestimate just because of how it's being figured out at this point in time. Couldn't we work into that, the connectivity issue that Councilmember Noble is talking about, to connect the soft surface trail up underneath 96 and over to that park? Couldn't that just be built into that project?
Yes. I will say when having the conversations with the Parks Rec and Golf Director, they feel rather confident about the 20 million because we also have to look at how we irrigate the parks because with respect to that park in and of itself and the size of it, we currently don't have an identified irrigation source of water. So that's going to be a costly endeavor to bring unless we're able to work and find partnerships. But with the trail in and of itself, we can work that into the design and have that be a factored cost.
You make a really good point about irrigation and availability of water, and that's a concern everywhere we go, it seems. But have we considered options like xeriscaping or more climate appropriate planting? Or
We can. We haven't started the design work yet on this particular facility, but we can as part of that effort. And to that, we can look at other, like I said, partnerships that would help to maybe bring that cost of the water resource down. But
yeah, it's always seemed silly to me to try to force things to grow where they wouldn't normally grow, and then you spend a lot of money and resources on water to try to keep them alive. It's a bit of a futile effort. Right. And then I was curious also about the estimate for the fitness centers along Highway 2, the Arsenal. That estimate seems really, really low to me, and maybe I wasn't clear in what I was asking for, but, I mean, what does that buy? $150,000 seems, that's a long stretch of road, and that seems very inexpensive for any kind of substantial improvement there.
I think it buys, and I'll probably get kicked underneath the virtual desk by the director, but it's my understanding is that that will buy your typical kind of trail equipment exercise, nothing of large note or stature, more about your stretching stations, your kind of small private kind of active exercise where you might find some pull-up bars or other activities in strategic locations along that, making that connection between the core city and the northern range along the highway.
Okay. Maybe I'll send some pictures along of what I was kind of envisioning, because I've seen some videos online of parks like this, kind of fitness parks, and it doesn't seem to me that that's kind of the same vision that maybe the director shared when making the estimate. So I'll just pass along some ideas if that's okay.
That would be helpful for us.
Sure. And then lastly, going back to my question about reimbursements, is it possible to see an estimate where we know that there's a portion of a project being covered by some other entity, so we can kind of estimate what would be left over after these projects are done and reimbursements are received? Because it seems to me that we could accomplish a lot more of these projects if we, I don't know if earmarked is the right word, but if we know that money is coming back and we could appropriate it for other projects, we could kind of get more bang for our buck, so to speak.
An example, I think, and this may be a little bit of the, I want to call it the chicken and the egg, but I'm going to look at Second Creek Farms and Bison Ridge Park. Obviously, with those two projects, full freight all in, we know that's somewhere in the range of $8.3 million. Now, obviously, we have to assign that to Roger's point within the next, and work through 85% of that within the next 3 years. I think to put a finer point on what Roger is saying is that if we are able to receive grants, let's say from the Adams County Open Space, for $4 million of that, that $4 million now becomes open for us to use on any other project within our CIPP program, but we won't know that for a period of time until we're well within the design and maybe even well into the construction aspect of being able to get that reimbursement. So it's kind of hard to be able to predict and earmark what we may or may not receive that may then open that for other use. So, but I see where you're going with that, and there's probably a sweet spot on how to be able to capture that, but I don't have that answer for you today, ma'am.
That's all right. Thanks, Jason.
So I just wanted to follow up on the Buckley Park. I texted Mr. Espinosa, and the community was looking for the park on the south side of 96, although it looks like, they were thinking more, I think that's Second Creek, because it's more to the west of the neighborhoods on the map that was up earlier. But I just wanted to confirm that it was on the south side of 96 that the residents were asking for that neighborhood park.
So for me, I'm kind of frustrated by this whole park conversation because almost 2 years ago, whenever I first asked about it, the initial answer was that we were going to do our Parks and Rec comp plan and we were going to figure out there. And so we've had a push to identify funding to build a park, and I don't feel like what's on the list here really meets the intent of what we were trying to do. The idea of a huge neighborhood park south, just north of Second Creek Farms, I don't see that as an answer to the issue of what the residents in this neighborhood are trying to solve. So it was my understanding whenever the deal was made with 96th Avenue and everything else that land was dedicated to the city, and that land sits approximately where the old Buckley Road and 96th Avenue interchange would have been, correct? Is that where the land was dedicated? And the purpose of it was we didn't want houses being built in the floodplain there, so we had them dedicate that land to us as...
It's this, this land right here next to Old Buckley Road down to 88th Avenue, that's what was dedicated to the city in addition to the floodplain.
In addition to the floodplain, okay. Then we come in, and the whole while, I think we're talking about possibly using this as a funding stream to provide these residents with a park. And then we hear, well, no, actually, we were going to do that just out of our regular programming. But we haven't had a conversation to do it out of the regular programming. We haven't had budget conversations of determining this is how we're going to fund this park. And so all that does is kick it that much further down the road. And quite honestly, I'm frustrated right now of dealing with this, in the fact that I don't feel we're ever getting a clear and concise answer of how it is that we can meet the needs of these residents, how we're going to fund it, when we can get the project done, so we can move forward on this and put this behind us in the rearview mirror.
So the plan was to build this park, which is what we call Second Creek Farm Park. What Councilmember Noble was suggesting is building something in this area, which has not been part of our plan. This parcel was dedicated to the city for both a detention pond area, and there was discussion back then of putting some type of park facility here, but that's never been incorporated into the plan until we know how this detention area is designed. You have the big, what's called Buckley Park, what was it, 65 acres? Yeah, 65 acres. Planned for this area with the high school going here. So in terms of the existing plan for parks, it's this big Buckley Park that was planned and this Second Creek Farm Park that was planned. This was left indefinite. What I'm saying in response to Councilmember Noble, if the council's desire is to build something in this area, then we can either build it out of this program or build it in our regular CIP program. It's going to be less than the $4 million that we're estimating for this park, but it certainly is possible. Just keep in mind that, you know, a big chunk of this is in the floodplain. So where exactly it goes, you know, would it be better here? I don't know. I'm not sure where the floodplain boundary exactly runs through here. But, so those are your choices, you know, either fund the really big park and not much else, because that's $20 million, or there's a $4 million park here, or you build something in this area that is less than the $4 million.
I don't see doing the big Buckley Park right now as a viable option because there's too much influx with the school district and whether or not we're sharing this. I mean, right now it's just not feasible to even throw that out there as this is an option because we haven't progressed far enough on the conversations with the school district, with Fulham Wider to figure out what land is going to be there and whether or not we're going to have a park or we're going to share, or are we going to land swap some of that land to another location. So that to me right now is it's completely off the table because we haven't had enough conversation. When you mention CIP funds, do we have enough in CIP funds to put to $2 million towards a park in that location right there?
This one here?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have money that we could dedicate March 21st through an ordinance, throwing money out of the CIPP to construct a park right there.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the roadway projects, and one caught my eye up there, which was High Plains Parkway. Can you give me some history on High Plains Parkway and how High Plains Parkway came to be an idea that it was going to be constructed? Right now, we currently, if you go up a little bit north there, we currently have Tower Road. Tower Road doesn't go by any houses, allows truck traffic to go through. It's pretty solid. Where did the idea come to divert Tower Road to High Plains Parkway and connect it to Buckley Road? Where did that idea originate?
That originated in the transportation plan dating back to 2002 or 1 or somewhere in there.
Well, the latest transportation plan we have is 2010. I don't know if there was one before that, Roger, or not, but that's the latest one we have.
There was, and that's why you see this alignment here on this area of Reunion. So Tower Road was intended to come off of alignment, follow this here, and then do the same thing up through this property and connect with Buckley Road. And the whole intent behind that, as I understood from the engineers back then, is to connect Buckley Road and Tower Road to provide a north-south connection going all the way up and south. Because Tower Road dead ends up in this area into Bar Lake. And so you don't have a total through connection north-south for the metro area. And that's why Buckley Road does continue on. And so that alignment would allow then this north-south connection from Tower Road, High Plains Parkway to Buckley.
Okay, and is this a city-led initiative to do this?
Well, for this area, yes. I don't know what the grand scheme, how that came about, but yes, that in terms of city plans, this has been on the city's comprehensive plan from early on. And, you know, I joined the city in 2001, and it was shortly after that that I heard about it from the engineers. So I know it's been planned that way for decades.
So here's what I'm grappling with here, and my major struggle is every time you go purchase a car, you're paying for these projects. Every time you go out to eat, you're paying for these projects. Every time you go buy something that is not a grocery in Commerce City, you're paying for these projects. And the one thing that we continue to hear over and over and over is how Commerce City has one of the highest sales tax in the state of Colorado. I feel like we owe it to the residents who are paying that 1% sales tax that was voted in 2013 to get the best bang for the buck, bar none. A project that we choose out there has to be one that we can go out and say, your sales tax dollars are paying for this, and it counts, and it's worth it. Tower Road is a shining example. The improvements that were made there, you can look at that and say, yep, that was worth 1% every time I go buy a car. You can look at Highway 2, even though that was an add-on project, and say, yep, that was worth it. You can look at the Bison Ridge Rec Center. But I look at some of the projects that are on this list, and I think, man, when I go buy a car, do I really want to think this is what my money went to? And I struggle with a lot of the choices up here because I can't see that they're worth every time I go buy a car. Now, maybe I should quit buying cars, but every time I go out to eat, maybe I should start cooking at home. I'm just struggling with some of these projects up here, and I still can't see a justification for some of them to make it come out of that money. And I don't want to be in this position where we're going, hey, all right, we just won the lottery. We got $36 million, and we throw it at whatever we can without making a smart decision on what it is we throw the money at. I appreciate that Public Works has gone through a scoring process. We talked about that earlier this afternoon. What I can't see is the criteria that went into that scoring process. What I don't see on any of the parks are the criteria that goes into choosing what's the project we should spend money on, what shouldn't we spend money on. And I look at, some of these costs, 5.2 for 120th Avenue. I mean, that's already been allocated. And I hate to go back and say, well, let's go ahead and use this money for it, and then we free that money up for something else. But we don't know what that is, it's something else. And when we don't know what that is, then do we turn around and spend $5.2 million on pencils and desk calendars, or do we spend $5.2 million on something that is worth every time I go purchase a car and I have to pay sales tax on it? Actually, I'm struggling with this exercise is making my head hurt. And I appreciate all the work that staff has gone into this, but I think when you listen to the questions being posed by the council, and you listen to the concerns, and you listen to what is going on, I think there's a lot of confusion out here too, saying, am I really getting my money's worth out of all these projects? At the same time, we have some big hitting items that we haven't even started putting money aside for, like a police substation, like overpasses over railroad tracks, things of that nature. And again, instead of sitting down and looking at how much money do we have in our unreserved fund balance? How much money do we have in our CIPP fund? And how much money do we have in these potential bonds? And what could we accomplish to make that 1% worth it? I feel like we're just grasping at straws here, trying to find projects that we can spend $36 million on instead of finding projects that are going to have a profound impact on the residents of this community.
Well, all of the projects have to be built at some point, so money is fungible. Spend it here, or you spend it over there. It really comes down to priority. Which ones do you want to see built first?
Councilmember Grimes, I think you had your hand up.
It may have been an error.
Councilmember Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to echo all of the sentiments that I've been hearing this evening. I look at the High Plains Parkway. To me, that is funding economic development to go out of Commerce City and straight up Buckley to Brighton. The 20 million or whatever it was for the park, I misread that as well as Councilmember Noble did, that it had to be for widening of the street, 96th, and then doing a park for the people who have been saying that they were left without one and promised one. And then a tap fee of $1,050,000 for that park? That doesn't make sense to me either. So I just want everybody to know that I'm feeling the same way on this. I may be new to all of this, but a lot of it just doesn't make sense to me.
Councilmember Dara.
So we need to give staff direction on which projects to be included for the bond issuance, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So we have to come up with one set of options that totals that 37 million tonight?
But again, you can amend that later if you wish.
And when is this issuance to take place, or?
In terms of scheduling, we need to let them know by the 17th, which is 3 days from now. But again, you can amend that later.
Okay, so if we come up with a combination of projects tonight and, next week we decide that we want to update the list and provide different direction as a council, we can do that?
Yes, they'll probably try to take a pound of my flesh, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can you please put the buckets of projects that you have back up there?
Yeah, so I originally started with this list here, which was 2 parks, 120th Avenue, 88th Avenue. But then decided, well, we already have 120th Avenue funded, so I took it off. Looked at the second group, which again, 2 parks, Buffalo Run Clubhouse expansion. Oh, I did leave 120th, sorry. Chambers Road and 96th. Then I looked at
Okay,
2
can we-
parks, 120th, Chambers, 112th, and 96th.
Okay, so let's talk about Bison Ridge Park.
Yep.
What are we getting for $4.3 million? Do we get an outdoor pool with that?
I don't believe so. That would be similar to Veterans Memorial Park, where it's built as an all-inclusive park.
Okay. Isn't the ultimate plan for that regional park there to have an outdoor pool that is using the same pool filtration system that is serving the Bison Ridge Recreation Center that was stubbed out so that they could plumb out to that? And the ultimate goal is to have that as a regional park?
No, sir. No outdoor pool has been contemplated for Bison Ridge Park.
Really?
But
Yes, sir.
The original design for the recreation center did include the concept of being able to add an outdoor pool.
Concept, in theory, yes, but
This park design does not include that.
that is correct.
Okay, so for $4.3 million, we're getting an incomplete park.
It wouldn't have the outdoor pool, yes.
Chambers Road, 106th Avenue to 112th Avenue. I don't think anybody can disagree that that's a much-needed thing. I question why 106th Avenue, why do we choose that as a stopping point? I think Councilmember Ford brought that up on last Monday evening. The bottleneck that'll take place there, are we basically going to be looking at 4 lanes all the way from 104th Avenue to 120th Avenue if we do that project for $8.7 million?
This would take it all the way from 104th to 112th. There still would be the segment north of 112th that I believe needs another lane, or is it 2 lanes there?
Yeah, it needs another lane, Roger, yeah.
So what is the cost to finish Chambers Road from 104th to 120th? What is the all-in cost for that?
You have that?
All-in cost is around 20 plus or minus million.
How is it that we can go from 106 to 112th and having to take it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes for $8.7 million, and then to go an extra half a mile to only have to add 1 more lane from 3 lanes to 4 lanes is going to more than double the cost of that?
Brent, correct me if I'm wrong, but the cost, while we're seeing 20 million, is also because of the significant improvement necessary for the bridge.
Right, so just to clarify, Mayor, so the cost from 104th to 112th is roughly $20 million, and our share is $8.7 million. The rest would be funded by the Reunion Metro District. To build the extra half mile north of 112th, I would have to guess, but I would say it would be in the $5 to $6 million range.
You have it on the list. I did a hard printout. 4.64 is what you gave me. I found it.
Okay.
That would take it up to 117th. And then
See, here again, I have a hard time spending $8.7 million, and it's not done. It's still an incomplete project because you're still going to have that bottleneck as you're coming south on Chambers that you got to merge into 1 lane all the way until you get to 112th, and then it opens back up again. How do you go out and justify to people, we spent $8.7 million of your tax dollars and we only did half the project? Yes, Councilmember Grimes.
Just along the same line of questioning, that portion from 112th up to 117th, that's 1 lane on the west side of Chambers. Is part of the issue there that those are unincorporated properties and we need to get easements or right-of-ways or something to build there?
Correct, we would have to buy right-of-way from those. I think there's 3 big unincorporated properties along the west side there.
Is Landing Place Church in the county or the city?
The
Is that in
church
the
is in
city?
the city.
Okay, because it's still a single lane there as well. Was there already a negotiated right-of-way with the church to build that extra lane?
Yes, we have the right-of-way from the church.
For the church, okay. Yeah, I've got to agree. If we're going to do any project on Chambers, it needs to be 104th to 120th, 4 lanes all the way across.
so that would change Chambers from 8.7 to basically $13 million. 13 million.
Well, and you can take out the 120th Avenue, and there's your additional $5.2 million to get that done.
Right.
Councilmember Ford.
I think if we're going to do that, which I agree we should, finish it so it's not like Peoria where it's next down. I mean, that's a perfect example. But I'd also like to see the lights go in at 117th at the same time.
Yep. Okay, 96th Avenue. I'm struggling on this one. If somebody can explain to me why it is that we need to widen only from Tower to Buckley, and what does that do as soon as you hit Buckley with traffic going westbound? I mean, as it is right now, you have traffic backed up on northbound Tower getting ready to turn onto westbound 96th Avenue. So are we going to have backups on 96th Avenue because we have to neck down from 2 lanes to 1 lane to cross over the bridge, or right in front of Frontera Village there? What are we trying to accomplish by going 4 lanes for a half a mile?
I would defer to the city engineer, but I would imagine this is in anticipation of the developments on the north and south side of 96th Avenue, and assuming that most of it's going to Tower Road.
So correct, Rudder. So I guess the intent was to just make sure we got our minor arterial section through all the new development there. If it backs up, I guess, in front of Frontera, I guess I wouldn't anticipate it would back up in front of Terra once we got all the new capacity east of Buckley. I guess we could expand the project all the way to Chambers if you would like, though.
And what is the cost to go all the way to Chambers?
If I have that cost.
Now, I mean, Anderson Farms shows up as currently in the development process, which adds, what, 730 homes or something immediately north of 96th Avenue. What does that project do for widening 96th Avenue all the way down to Potomac?
So, good question. One that will be negotiated as part of the annexation agreement that will ultimately come back before you.
Okay. So what is our cost to take 96th Avenue out to Chambers, 4-lane road? Well, before you answer that, let me interject as well. East of Tower Road, is it part of Legato and Settler Creek to widen that section of 96th Avenue to 4 lanes? Or are we going to have an issue where we take it 4 lanes all the way up to Tower and then everybody's got to merge right after the traffic light?
I'll have to get back to you on that, Mayor. I believe Legato was supposed to build out 96th Avenue.
That's my understanding.
North and south, or just, or eastbound and westbound, or just eastbound?
At a minimum, it is the frontage along their property, but we'll have to confirm if it's the northern section adjacent to Settlers Crossing as well. But if I may, to your question, Mayor, just from your experience, Brent, what's the going rate for construction of roadway per mile?
So for a minor arterial, it's roughly 7.9 million a mile. So we could do a rough interpolation of what it would cost to build out the other half of 96 from Buckley to Chambers.
I mean, that's another one I struggle with because, again, it's an incomplete road. I mean, at least it would take us from Chambers to Tower, relying on somebody else to do from Tower out to E470, and hopefully it's complete. And then we have to figure out how it is we go west of Chambers all the way down to Highway 2. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
On 96 between Buckley and Tower, is Second Creek Farms responsible for any of the widening of 96, just as Buffalo Highlands was responsible for the 96th Avenue Bridge?
I don't believe that Second Creek Farms has been responsible for widening 96. They're paying the road impact fee, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If they pay the road impact fee for arterial improvements, we can't require them to build out the improvements, correct?
That's correct. If the impact fee is applicable to that roadway, then we cannot basically double dip and get a second bite at the apple and have them build out something that they're already paying for through the impact fee.
And that would be the old impact fee, not the new potential impact fee that we might vote on someday.
Correct, it would be the old impact fee.
And would that have typically been included in a development agreement to have them pay, just as other metro districts have had to pay?
Well, I think that's the struggle, is that, as Matt said, you can't double dip, right? So if they're paying the road impact fee, we're really not allowed to make them build out the arterial improvements.
Right, I'm just trying to educate myself here, since there was an intergovernmental agreement for Buffalo Highlands, which is right next door to Second Creek Farms, that made them responsible for the 96th Avenue Bridge. So how did Second Creek Farms, which is a much larger project, not have to be responsible for widening of 96th?
So it sounds like this is one of those situations where, as time went on, it became cheaper for them to pay the impact fee than to build the road. And since that's what the code requires, is the impact fee payment, that's likely what they opted to do at that time. And since we can't double dip and the impact fee has not been updated, we're stuck in this position where we're behind behind an ability to get a fee that actually reflects the cost of construction, which is what the impact fee is designed to provide us with.
Okay, thank you. We should have the impact fee as an emergency agenda item also, I think, rather than wasting any more time waiting for it. I am concerned also about the tower to E470 area, and I would assume the same thing applies to Settlers Crossing. And then, as the mayor was talking about, from Buckley to Chambers. And I know there's been issues in that area as well, because cars are driving around semis in the turn lanes in order to pass them on 96. So it's become rather dangerous down at that end also. This is, as the mayor has expressed, complicated to settle on these, and it's fairly similar to the struggle we had at the retreat when this was presented in basically the same fashion.
Okay, let's talk about 72nd Avenue, US 85 to Colorado Boulevard. Can you bring up a map, please?
So this is 72nd here, 74th,
Okay,
Colorado.
so if I'm reading this correctly, which properties would be unincorporated Adams County?
The properties that are highlighted in kind of opaque shading, Mayor?
All that is unincorporated Adams County.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. So what exactly would we be doing with this project? Widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes?
Yes,
Curb, gutter, sidewalk all the way down
yes.
the entire project? Okay, and that was how many millions of dollars? And is there any support from Adams County, seeing as a large portion of that falls directly within the county?
So part of that goes back to this annexation discussion and strategy that we are having at a much higher level and will ultimately bring to the council. But as you see there, there are properties of note that are and have the ability from an enclave annexation that would make that process somewhat more pliable and streamlined for any public improvements.
Okay, immediately east of the ULC building is supposed to be an affordable housing project, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And have we negotiated the developer agreement with them yet?
We are in the process of negotiating the annexation agreement and zoning with them that will come in.
And so as part of that project, we can fund part of, or we can use exactions to get certain money contributed towards doing this project for 72nd Avenue?
You could, but just so that just putting it all out there, you can, but those projects are typically running on a very tight budget and aren't necessarily looking to those regional improvements, maybe only improvements along their frontage.
Okay. Okay, can you come back to your list, please? All right, council, let's try to do this as systematically as possible so we can move this conversation along. The park for Buffalo Highlands in that neighborhood. Right, yes, sir.
I thought it may just be worthwhile, as you all were discussing and trying to take notes from delivering on profound improvements that provide both a tangible and an imminent benefit to our community. Roger, myself, and Brent were discussing what could be a revised compilation of projects that maybe meet that interest by council. One being obviously the Second Creek Farm Neighborhood Park as it relates to location, whether it's south of 96 or further south at the location of Telluride and Second Creek Farms. The Bison Ridge Park we removed, but we've kept Monaco Park as it relates to Phase 2, Chambers Road between not 106th but 104th up to 120th. Looking at the Buffalo Run Clubhouse expansion, which we believe to be significant, and I'll call it landscape shifting for that facility and its continued growth and use by our residents. The 96th Avenue from not Tower to Buckley, but Tower to Chambers Road, and the Eagle Point kitchen remodel with the 67th Place Highway 2 crossing Railroad underpass. That will increase connectivity for residents in the core city. And that gets you to about that 37.8 million.
Okay, let's talk about the Buffalo Run Clubhouse so everybody's on the same page of what that entails. What are we getting for $7.9 million?
So that would be an expansion of obviously the clubhouse, but also of the dining area, the establishment of a pavilion, improvements to the kitchen area that would allow for us to expand both seating and activities to a variety of different events that we're currently not able to provide within that facility.
Okay, that was a high-level overview. Can we drill down a little bit more as far as, when we talk about increased seating, are we going to have a dining room that is separate from the bar lounge area, or is it all still going to be intermingled? When we talk about kitchen equipment, is it actually going to be a full-scale kitchen that is capable of serving? What are we doing? But then my next question is, if we dump $7.8 million in taxpayers' money into it, are we going to be able to operate the facility as residents would expect it to be operated?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I did ask the director to send me the exact floor plan and kind of share with you the detail, so bear with me on that question.
All right, Councilmember Grimes.
I was going to ask some of those similar questions about the golf course expansion. As far as I can see, we can't operate it as it exists today, and it's not full. At least my understanding is the reason it was closed for 6 weeks is because we can't even meet capacity or staffing. Let me say that again. Customer capacity or staffing of customers as it stands. So I can't see dumping $7.8 million into it to hope that maybe we can staff it and people will come to it until we can do it as it exists today.
So, having spoken with staff, and I appreciate the comments from both of you and the mayor, staff has assured me that obviously outside of operational shifts due to low periods of activity, that they are and would be able to operate that. Now, once again, I understand that that's a concern by the council and one that's not unwarranted, but once again, our staff has been able to assure us as part of these conversations that if we're going to invest that level of investment into that facility, that it would be able to operate to a functional level and operate to a level that we're currently seeing as it relates to remaining in the black. Once again, like I said, I'm waiting for more of the particular details as to the facility itself, but simply that for your question.
Just as a follow-on to that, I want to be clear, it's one of my favorite places in the northern part of the city. It's a great facility and a great restaurant. I think it's highly underutilized, and I would love to see money put into an expansion, but the way it stands today, I just don't see that kind of investment until it's working at capacity as it stands today. And quite frankly, with the number of complaints we get about lack of sit-down restaurants, I can't believe there's not a line out the door every single night, which kind of points to how do we better utilize and advertise that existing amenity.
And I'm all in on this one, to be honest with you. This is something back whenever we had the paper up on the wall over here and we were putting stars up there that I pushed for 3 years ago to say, man, I really want to see this expanded and turned into the facility that we know it could be. My concern, once again, is $7.857 million going to finish the project, or is it going to be half done and we got to come back 3 years from now expecting to dump another $5 million into it to finish what we didn't get done the first time? I'm trying to break away from this mentality of we'll just do enough to get by. Let's do it right and be done and put it in our rearview mirror and move on to other projects and continue that. Yes, sir.
If I may, Dylan, if you could let Ms. Keefe into the meeting. I think she heard me virtually poking her with a stick about the question on the golf course, and she's here to answer your questions.
She is, and I'm moving her over now.
Thank you, Dylan. Mayor, members of City Council. To answer your last question, Mayor, yes, this would finish the project. In general, and we've actually had an architect do design. We have some initial estimates for this project. With the clubhouse, we would expand the dining room and the kitchen. You can't do one without, we can't expand any service without expanding the kitchen. So it allows for expansion and private, where we can separate dining for private parties from the main clubhouse. And that, I think that's been part of the challenge with some of our service. We're not always consistent. You show up and the dining room's closed. I think we will be able to better market to small private parties, but still have an open dining room. It will also allow for some enclosing of the patio so it becomes more year-round use. It'd still be able to be open so that you can enjoy the summer part of it. I believe, Mayor, you mentioned some thoughts about improving the conditions with the pavilion, where we might be able to have some heating and cooling and expand service there. This plan includes that. Also, along with some office space, we don't currently have any office space for our restaurant staff. So it involves a little bit of office space. I also want to share that this does involve some minor expansion of the maintenance yard. We don't have enough space there with development around the area that we used to use for some storage. We need to make some improvements in the maintenance to improve our efficiencies so we can store more and make better use of the space that we have. But this is the complete project. Will provide for improvements for the clubhouse and the restaurant, for the next 10 years until we're looking at what you need to do next, maybe. And I certainly understand Councilmember Grimes' comments about staffing. We, as everyone everywhere, is struggling with staffing right now. I do think some of that is unique to coming out of COVID. We will continue to work on that, but if we can provide more consistent opportunities, I think we'll also be able to provide more consistent, service, which would allow us hopefully to hire staff and retain staff because they're going to have the hours they need to, to make a living.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Keith, for those comments. This is what I see as a missed opportunity. If we've already had an architect draw this up and show what it looks like, that's the kind of information that should be sitting in front of us to be able to look at and visualize and say, yeah, that's worth $7.85 million. Let's go with that one. But if that's just sitting in somebody's email or sitting in a shared drive or SharePoint or something like that and not actually sitting in front of the people that are going to allocate the money, we have a missed opportunity there. We're going to go with Councilmember Grimes, Councilmember Hurst, and then Councilmember Noble.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Carolyn, for jumping on. I'm curious if these improvements take into consideration a future Par 3 course. As I understand it, that may be in the plans in the future for the other side of Chambers, and there would be some shared facilities between the existing course and that one.
And no, it does not, Councilmember Grimes, mainly because that project is something we've been looking at in cooperation with Oakwood, and we're not anywhere near any sort of finalization. We've identified an area, we've been working with them. The connectivity would be part of Chambers improvements and improvements that Reunion would be responsible for, that would provide an underpass for folks to get to the clubhouse long term. But no, at this point, our clubhouse expansion and improvements are not tied to the Par 3 project.
I think you said that the expansion of the clubhouse that's proposed here would be good for the next 10 years? Is that what I heard? Do we expect to have...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Do we expect to have some sort of an agreement and plan inside of 10 years on the other golf course? Because if so, I feel like this falls short of that expansion and should be included in this proposal.
I don't know what the timing will be with the Par 3. And quite honestly, the expansion of the clubhouse and the needs we have with our maintenance facility, we have regardless of a Par 3. And my comment about 10 years is because that's about the time you have to start looking at repair and replacement. That's why I made the comment about 10 years. And at this point, unless Deputy City Manager Rogers can assist me, we don't have a timeline for the Par 3.
No, I think Director Keefe is correct. Oakwood remains engaged with wanting to continue moving the Par 3 forward. However, their focus as of this time has shifted to other priorities that they are trying to navigate. So we hope to be back around the table with them on that matter Q2, early Q3 of this year, but they are prioritizing their efforts that they have within the community and some of the things that they have on the table with us. Once again, that being part of 106 to Chambers, 106 to 112 on Chambers Road being a priority with the city that they are working on, in addition to the Par 3 and in addition to their other development projects. So.
Then I would just ask that as that conversation continues with Oakwood, that connectivity of the Par 3 to the main golf course is part of the negotiation so that we don't end up with half a project and no way to get there.
Agree with you on that, ma'am.
Thank you. I think part of this discussion that's important to me is the holistic view on, I know nothing's set in stone yet, but we are definitely planning on a aging adult. Is that the correct terminology? Active adult, community right there. And, one of the things we've heard several times is that we have a great active adult community center in Eagle Point. And it just seems that either at Bison Ridge or at Buffalo Run in that vicinity, either east or west of this new community that we're going to build, that we have to have something like that incorporated in. You have to have an active adult center. I think there's opportunity at the golf course if we're building buildings with offices and things like that. I obviously recognize by looking at a map that there's not a ton of open space to develop something like that on. But that then goes into, okay, well, at the Bison Ridge Park addition, should we be looking at adding that type of amenity for not just the new community? It just seems to, make sense in that area because it's kind of a recreational corridor on 112th. I think I would like us to start not necessarily nailing down how exactly where that's going to be, but it needs to be incorporated into this discussion because, again, I think that's a huge piece as of the community that will be missing if we don't.
Director Keith, you want to respond to that?
Yes, sir, thank you. So it's my understanding the active adult age-restricted neighborhood that would be near the proposed Par 3, the whole idea is trail connectivity in the underpass connection to the Buffalo Run Clubhouse. In that gated neighborhood, they will have some of their own amenities to provide for activities. The one thing that I believe the Buffalo Run expansion will allow for us to do more of will be activities such that we've had recently at the Buffalo Run Clubhouse. We have to close the clubhouse down. The comedy show evenings that sold out. With the expansion, we can put those in the private dining room and it will accommodate more than what we could in the clubhouse. So it really does open up the opportunity to provide more of a community space for those types of activities that really are difficult for us to do at Bison Ridge because quite frankly, people want access to the bar and alcohol for those types of events. It's difficult for us to have our own events and have alcohol with those events at Bison Ridge. But the expansion of the clubhouse opens up lots of opportunities, not just for active adults, but for our residents for different types of activities that we're just starting to do in our department, but we have limited space to provide those. And Mayor, I would like to address, you're absolutely correct. We should have this plan in front of you. We are on the schedule for the April study session. The idea was that we'd be able to present that to you, keeping in mind that 2023 budget process, not knowing that this opportunity came quickly. So we do intend to share that with you and apologize that we haven't done that sooner.
Thank you. Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. I would, first of all, caution against doing anything to the patio area outside because that definitely is full when the weather permits. And it's always been a great view from there. I can point to Torrey Pines and Pebble Beach as two of great public golf courses, of course. Now, this won't be at that level, but I know that there is concern about the density of homes that have been built on the back nine and their proximity to the fairway. And I really think that that is going to take a toll on tournaments, that we may actually see ourselves losing some tournaments because of the problems of people not hooking or slicing their balls and going into someone's window. I think that we need to do something at the clubhouse itself that does attract people because we're going to have to balance out the problem of the development that occurred, and it occurred because that's what the minimum allowed. but it is a problem, and I know it's been stated as so. The other issue, I think, is that we really need to have a larger kitchen, and we need to be looking at things that might attract a lot of people there, like a wood-fired oven, pizza oven, or something that will bring families in a different way than they are right now. I'm glad to hear that the comedy program was a sellout, but as has been pointed out, there isn't a whole lot of space to put in all of the things that you're talking about. I would like to see it before we add it to this. I would rather see it in the budget than, because we're going to need to see how the summer falls out and what the reaction is from the various tournaments that are going to be playing at the golf course this year.
All right, council, if you look up there, there's a list that starts right around the numbers 10 right there, and then it says Second Creek Farms Neighborhood Park for $4 million, finishing Monaco Park for $1.6 million, Chambers Road from 104th to 120th is $13 million and some change, Buffalo Run Clubhouse expansion that we just talked about, $7.857 million, 96th Avenue Tower to Chambers for $9 million, Eagle Point Kitchen remodel for $625,000, 67th Place / Highway 2 crossing under the underpass for $1.4 million for a total of $37.823 million, $200. Is this list good for council to give to staff so that we can move on to the city council meeting? Councilmember Grimes.
Just one request. I thought we talked earlier about pulling the Second Creek Park off of this list and paying for it out of,
I believe that was for a small park that could be just immediately adjacent to 96th
So
and the
that's
Second
different
Creek
than this
Trail. That
one.
would be different than this one. This is the huge neighborhood park that sits just north of Second Creek Farms and immediately south of Buffalo Highlands.
so we're talking about 3 different parks, not 2, okay.
Two. Yeah. If we do the small park at 96th Avenue and the underpass there, then that would come out of CIPP funds, and that's something council would have to prove at a future meeting. Councilmember Ford.
On Chambers Road, after hearing about the underpass, if we do an additional Part 3, is that contemplated in our Chambers Road improvements, which I'm assuming it's not? If it was, would we save money by doing it at the same time rather than later?
Councilmember Ford, it was included as part of the Chambers Road project.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I was just curious with the Buffalo Run clubhouses, as of now, is there enough parking? Or do you think later on that's going to be a problem too?
Councilmember Alan Thomas, yes, we were able to, if you may recall, provide for the parking lot expansion. That is already completed, and that was in anticipation of future expansion of the clubhouse.
Okay, so it's already been budgeted for and covered then? Oh,
It's
already
actually
there.
complete.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. As I said, I would move the Buffalo Run Clubhouse expansion to later. I would take it off this list, but I would move Bison Ridge up. There are a lot of residents in North Commerce City that would like to see an accessible park that we see at Veterans Park in the north, and we don't have one of those kinds of parks, so that would be really good to do there. And I have a question. When we were showing the development occurring between 88th and 96th, how many houses are there between Buckley and Tower, 88th and 96th? How many are anticipated?
I unfortunately don't have that number off the top of my head, ma'am.
Is there a way to look
If I
it
may
up?
ask, are you talking on both sides of?
I'm talking about Buffalo Highlands neighborhood, the Second Creek Farms neighborhood.
I would say it'd be a safe estimation that you're looking at 800 plus units.
Between both of those subdivisions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
For that Second Creek Farms neighborhood park, can we do that accessible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we could just plus up that by a little bit extra money in order to continue with that project and then not have to do the Bison Ridge Park at this time? And that would take care of an accessible park in the Northern Range?
I believe so, yes, sir. As part of our design effort, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Grimes?
I was actually, I had one other question, and then I want to respond to Councilmember Noble's request. Monaco Park, that 1.6, does that take into account the open space grant for that project?
Yes.
It already does?
Yes.
Okay. And then I agree 100%. I'd like to see the Bison Ridge, or I'm sorry, the Buffalo Run Golf Course expansion project. I'd like to see that done separately from this project and put the Bison Ridge Park back on the list. And with the difference, I'd like to see if it's possible to include the outdoor pool as part of that project. I think that delivers something for more of our residents than the expansion at this time on the golf course.
If I may ask Director Keefe to speak as it relates to the concept of an outdoor leisure pool or the expansion of Bison Ridge in greater detail?
So the design for the Bison Ridge Recreation Center is such that we could expand the aquatic facility. Initially, the expansion was designed for the addition of a competitive pool, so lap lanes for swim team. It does not mean that we can't consider an outdoor leisure pool, but at one point, I think competitive swimming was ranked a little bit higher than the leisure component. And I think, I do think that that's one of those topics that should be discussed as part of the master plan update. Because quite honestly, we are limited in the time that we can have outdoor pools open. And we don't have a competitive aquatic component. And I honestly, I would certainly defer to City Council as to what you think is the greater priority. But I do think that might be one of the questions to be asked of residents as we update the master plan. But the mayor was correct in that we did design. Typically, an outdoor pool, though, would be a standalone system. It wouldn't be tied into the indoor facility.
Just to clarify, that's what I was referring to, and that was my understanding, that it would be a lap lane style pool. That doesn't mean it can't be shallow at one end for, use of just play activities, not solely for competitive lap swimming, but that's what I'm asking for, not specifically a leisure type activity pool.
Okay, I thought you meant an outdoor pool. My apologies.
Mr. Rogers?
Thank you, Mayor. Just so that we don't catch council off guards, as it relates to the Buffalo Run Golf Course expansion, that 7.875, the one clear distinction I do want to bring back is that if we're talking about this as part of the 2023 CIPP, it's highly unlikely that that full amount is going to be covered within that 1 year of that programming. So you're going to have to look at that funding across multiple years, whereas this provides you with, once again, eminent delivery and development of that use if you so choose to. Now, once again, that's your decision to make as council, but just have to be frank and forward with you all about how we have to look at that balancing of the various projects that we have for CIPP with respect to the sources of funding that we can access and the fund and the revenues that we have to being able to bring that to fruition. So I just want you all to be aware of that and know that as part of when we come back to you all as part of that discussion.
Okay, so how much do we have in the CIPP fund right now that is not already dedicated to other projects?
In the 2K, I can't speak to the total balance. We'd have to have the finance department take a look at that. But in the 2K, project, we had I forget exactly what the title of it was, but it was for contingency and basically the consulting assistance that we had. Anyway, all of that wrapped together is about $4 million.
Okay. Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, for me, I only want to see one park up here. I mean, we're just kind of having a sidebar in that, less than 3% of the dollars up here are in the south now. And, I can get the roads are badly needed. I think the clubhouse expansion, we always hear, we want more commercial, we want more dining all the time. This is our chance to make that dining in something that the city has control, because, we're not the private developers that build the restaurants, and outside of this one restaurant that the city has control over, so to me, that's our opportunity to bring that to residents. And, it's one of those things where if you build it, they will come. So if we build something nice that is that indoors, dining option that people want with a nice patio and, a nice bar, people are going to go and visit it. I think the reason that people haven't been visiting is because there's more options up there now. So, and let's be honest, what the golf course does with the little kitchen that they have is, nothing short of a miracle, because they do some amazing things. And if they had a real kitchen, just imagine what they could do with that. So I prefer the clubhouse expansion over having two parks. I think, making the Second Creek Park accessible. People already travel down to Veterans Memorial to use that park, so having another park up there, I don't think if it matters if it's on 96 or 112 people in the Northern Range are gonna use that park. But, I just want to be cognizant of, let's keep it to one park and just make that one park be what we want.
Okay, so again, we're at the list: Second Creek Farms Neighborhood Park, Monaco Park, Chambers, and then probably need to add another $1 million to Second Creek Farms to make it accessible. Plus, put it in there so we can see the number. Monaco Park, finishing that phase 2. Chambers Road from 104th to 120th being complete. Buffalo Run Clubhouse expansion, 96th Avenue Tower to Chambers. Eagle Point Kitchen remodel. 67th Place Highway 2 crossing, Railroad underpass. That puts us at approximately $39 million. We have approximately $37 million, so we will need $2.8 million either out of the unreserved fund or out of, if there's part of the 2K CIPP fund that we have available for that, correct?
Or grants, yes.
Or grants if we get some along the way to get that. Councilmember Hurst.
One quick clarification on the Chambers Road from 104th to 120th. We don't have any opportunity for other funding to come in?
This is just our portion.
Got it, just want to make sure.
Okay, if you can scroll back up real quick, please, on the parks, or on the, on the roadway projects real quick. 56. No, I know, I want to see dollar values. Oh, that's too small for me to see those dollar values. That's too difficult. There's a little slider down in your lower right-hand corner. It's got a plus and a minus. You can grab it and slide it to the right and left, and it'll do that zoom for you. Scroll down, please. Let's talk 56th Avenue, Brighton Boulevard to US 85. What are we talking with that project?
That one takes a 2-lane road that's in very beat-up shape, widens it, replaces the pavement and widens it to 4 lanes.
Is that more of a need than, I mean, I see the score is better than 72nd Avenue. 72nd Avenue, again, I have issues with because we have so much unincorporated Adams County down there, and we need to get that annexed in before we start looking at that fully. Can you take that project, please, and throw it into the master mix that we have? Not 7, yeah, 56th. Thank you. As that list stands right there, we would need to take about $8 million out of our unreserved fund balance, which sits at $66 million. My question to the council, are you good with the list that sits right there with pulling that money out in order to add another road project in the southern part of the city to the list?
My only issue is that I've sat in on the comp plan conversations when they have the discussions over Zoom and stuff, and people have asked for shade around the Arsenal when they're renting on that property. People have asked for shade on Second Creek Trail. These are not things that people haven't brought up. They definitely have over the past year since the comp plan began, the process began. So,
Okay. How about we add another $466,800 for shades along the Highway 2 perimeter trail as well as on Second Creek Trail so that people have shades to sit down? Would that be enough money to get that done?
Ms. Keefe, are you still with us?
466,800.
Yes, I am still here. I'm sorry, Mayor, can you repeat that total? I was writing notes here.
If we had $466,800, would that be enough money for us to put additional shade shelters out along the Highway 2 perimeter trail as well as on Second Creek?
I would simply say it might give us a start. We'd have to go in and take a look at where we could put those, and it would be a start.
It would be a start. Okay.
And Mayor, just so that's a finer point, any excess would be a budget appropriation. It would not be handled as part of the bond resolution, just so.
Correct. So for the purpose of the bond, we would basically remove the Buffalo Run Clubhouse expansion, and that would be done through the CIPP process. And that should put you back down around the $37 million that we have available through the bonds. Voila. But we are committed to getting the Buffalo Run Golf Course expansion done as part of this process. We're just going to use approximately $8 million out of the unreserved fund balance. A lot of side chatter, council. What are you guys thinking? Can we move forward with this?
so I would put an oasis at the end of Second Creek Trail on the south side of the 96th Street Bridge.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
And I like the list as it stands now.
Councilmember Dare.
So my only problem with 56 over 72nd is Suncor is going to love you for fixing 56th Avenue right there, because that's going to be the primary beneficiary. I mean, it needs to be done, but where 72nd would be more for future residential that it would serve. But I'm okay with this list.
Councilmember Hurst.
The only thing I would say in response to that is if we want to keep trucks out of neighborhoods, we need to have truck routes that are feasible to drive on. And 56, I hear all the time, I'm not taking that road. You have to, I think I heard it from you one time, you have to put your wallet in your teeth so you don't chatter your teeth all the way down the road. And so I just want to have that perspective. I'm not advocating for it, but I'll tell you that truck traffic will go where the easiest flow is, and when you have a torn up road, they're going to avoid that until they have to get on it. And so if we're trying to divert truck traffic away from the neighborhoods and kind of the main roads that we want passenger vehicles to travel on, you have to take care of your truck routes, which 56 is. And so I just want us to keep that in perspective, because that's exactly what we hear in every single city around the state.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'm okay with switching 56 to 72nd for the reasons described. I think we need to provide for residents over trucking at this juncture with this project.
Councilmember Ford.
You know, I like the 56th Avenue, not because it's going to benefit Suncor, but a lot of people are using that to avoid I-70 and the construction thereof. And it's the cost of the alignments, not the wallet between the teeth, that hurts the most when you drive that road. I still would like to see what the cost would be to improve the medians between 72nd and Highway 2 on Quebec. I think that's a huge improvement for the south.
Do we have an estimate on that? Can you swag it?
He's gonna do a quick swag and let you know, sir.
Do we have the ability of reappropriating 2021 dollars to get that project done?
You mean from the operating budget?
Yes.
Certainly. Again, just comes back to priorities.
Okay. I mean, I agree with Councilmember Ford. I mean, a lot of money was spent on 104th Avenue putting in new rock last year, and yet the medians down in the southern part of the city have still been left with that very grayish looking mulch. Wild grass and mulch, yeah. So I agree that that's a great opportunity. Just trying to figure out, is that something we need to fund out of this project, or do we have resources available to fund that project with a commitment that we'll get it done this year?
We have other resources that could be used, yes.
Is that good for you? As long as we have a commitment that we'll get that done. Okay. Councilmember Douglas, are you good with the list the way it is, and do you have an opinion on 56th Avenue versus 72nd?
Yeah, I would prefer it to be 72nd.
Okay. Councilmember Davis?
Personally, I think either one of them will benefit the city. 56 does help with the truck traffic. 72nd offers new opportunities, so I would be okay with either one of them.
Councilmember Noble?
I drive 72nd a lot. 56, that area down there seems troubled. I would do, the roads are troubled. I would do 56th.
Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, and I'd like to stick with 56. I think that needs a lot more work than 72nd.
Okay. So the list stands right now with 56th Avenue being the one that we do instead of 72nd. Thank you. And again, we are looking at 37 million, which will be taken care of by the bonds, and then the commitment of another 7.857 million. Everybody good? Staff, are you good with that list?
Yes, sir.
Can you execute that list?
It's my understanding we can execute that list.
Okay. We will adjourn the study session, give everybody a chance to go use the restroom before we take our seats up at the dais for the special meeting. All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Huseman,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas,
Present.
Councilmember Madera,
Present.
Councilmember Davis, Councilmember Noble,
Present.
Councilmember Hurst,
Present.
Councilmember Grimes,
Present.
Councilmember Ford, Councilmember Douglas,
Present.
Mayor Huseman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We are all present, so no need for a motion. First up, we have resolutions. Resolution 2022-15, a resolution authorizing contract with Michael Baker International Incorporated. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-15. Councilmember Madera?
So moved.
Councilmember Grimes?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-15. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2022-15, a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with Michael Baker International Incorporated for design and pre-construction services for the widening of and improvements to Colorado Boulevard.
All right, I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-15. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have Resolution 2022-25, projects to be undertaken and funded with Bond Series 22A. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no request for questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-25. Councilmember Madera?
Move to adopt resolution 2022-25.
Councilmember Hurst?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-25. Is there any discussion?
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
so I've modified the resolution with the new list that you just agreed to. Some of the language will have to be tweaked just a little bit. If you're trusting me to do that on the fly, the resolution will be ready for you to go.
Mr. Hayter, is there any objection to that?
I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager, I didn't hear exactly the change that was proposed there.
So we have a new list. Mr. Gibson, if you could throw me up on the screen.
So this is the list based upon discussion earlier.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, so this will be a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-25 as amended by the city manager to include the projects discussed by the city council at the previous study session. Councilmember Hurst?
So moved.
Councilmember Madera?
Sorry, what was that?
Have a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-25 as amended by the city manager to include the projects previously agreed to by the city council at the previous study session.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to do so. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2022-25, a resolution designating the projects to be undertaken and funded with proceeds of sales and use tax revenue bond series 2022A as authorized by voters at the November 6, 2013 election.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-25 as amended by the city manager to include the previously agreed upon projects by the city council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we'll move on to ordinances on first reading. It's going to be Ordinance 2365, Buffalo Run Golf Course Well Project. I would like to invite Jamie Rice, city planner, to give the presentation.
Good evening, council members. Tonight we have a request for an ordinance approving the Buffalo Run Golf Course well drilling. Some background information. Buffalo Run Golf Course has experienced drought throughout the past few years. More specifically, we have reached our limit on the allocated acre feet in past years that is currently served by wells into an existing irrigation storage pond. Staff has identified a need for an alternative irrigation source. And we considered these top two options, which would be a non-tributary well in the lower Arapahoe Aquifer, which would be a cost of approximately $515,000 for the well drilling. The other option was a non-potable supply through South Adams County Water and Sanitation District, which would include a connection through their 112th line through the water district. And that cost would be about $800,000 to connect, as well as an annual fee of $78,000 for that water. On February 14th, we had a study session with City Council, and there were some alternative options that we were asked to explore in greater detail. So that included a Central Water Conservancy District augmentation of well water, which would be a purchase augmentation contract through a landowner. It would add irrigation well to Central's augmentation plan. Upon further discovery, we figured out that the city would have to include the golf course into the district and groundwater management subdistrict, which could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Additionally, we would have to petition the board to include the golf course, which is a tax exempt city property. So we would have to gauge their interest in including a tax exempt property. Additionally, there would be additional legal and engineering costs for water court cases to add the city's well to Central's augmentation plan. And the amount of augmentation water varies from year to year based on Central's quota and their priorities. So upon looking at this alternative option, we were still looking for those two top options in our research. Some more background information, some pros to the non-tributary well, which would be that lower Arapahoe Aquifer well. We would have the independence of not relying on another entity. This would be separate from South Adams County Water District. The golf course would not have to include into the water district boundaries, so we would not need approval from their board or from the water district. Some cons to that non-tributary well is a perceived heavy reliance on non-renewable aquifer supplies. And the water quality considerations, there is high sodium in the lower Arapahoe well, which is treatable. Looking at that non-potable line that would be built onto 112th, it is renewable, reliable water source provided by the city's water provider. And we do have a positive working relation with the South Adams County Water District currently. Some cons to this non-potable line, the city would not have control of the source. We wouldn't have that independence like we would with the well. It is fairly expensive in comparison to the well, and we would have to pay for the full connection fees as well, in addition to that annual fee for the water. And this is a handy little comparison where you can see the approximate price for the drilling of the well and the connection fees. So you can see right there with the installation and connection fees, the price for the non-potable line from South Adams County Water District is about $700,000. The well would be about $515,000. The annual operations and maintenance cost is a little bit less with that lower Arapahoe well as well. And over a 50-year period, that O&M cost is about $200,000 to $600,000. And looking at the cost of water and additional operations and maintenance from the non-potable line is almost $2 million, as you'll see right there. A little bit more information on our suggestion of the lower Arapahoe well. It is a non-tributary well, so it's not subject to water rights administration by the state. It will be coming from the lower Arapahoe Aquifer, and we will have rights for up to 40 acre feet per year based on ownership of golf course lands, which is about what staff has identified as the need for a contingency plan on that. On the well is what we would need to have an appropriate amount of backup should we need it. Upon searching for well drilling companies, we have sought out Lane Christensen for their quotes, as they are a reputable company and the city has used them before, as well as they were recommended by our water consultants as well. This is a site map of the Buffalo Run Golf Course and where the well would approximately be drilled. In the timeline, what staff is looking at, the state permitting process usually takes about 60 days, and the well drilling only takes about a week, but that's by the availability of the driller, and drillers are getting increasingly busy. So our goal is to have the well drilled and in place by October 2022. This is when our water year ends, and that would be a good time for Parks and Rec to be able to have that contingency plan should we need it. So staff is recommending council approve the reappropriations ordinance for the Buffalo Run irrigation well to use the Lower Arapahoe well. This concludes staff's presentation. We also have Andrea Carroll. She is a part of our water consultants. She's available for questions, as am I.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff or the consultant? Seeing no requests for questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2365. Councilmember Hurst.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2365 by council as seated.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2365. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I think this is a really good timing to get this done for obvious reasons that we just heard from a drought perspective, but we're also investing quite a bit into the golf course this year in terms of redoing all of our irrigation. And so I honestly think that if we redo all of our irrigation and then run out of water, it's not going to be the best investment that we're making this year to redo all of that. So this makes a lot of sense from a timing perspective as well. And so that's why I'm going to be voting to approve it.
Seeing no other requests for discussion, Mr. Gibson, would you please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Ordinance 2365, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by transferring $515,000 from the Water Acquisition Fund to the Capital Improvement and Preservation Plan Fund, CIPP, for costs associated with the Buffalo Run Golf Course well project and the authorization of the expenditures thereof. Your vote is now open on the touch panels.
All right, motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to ordinance 2369, Adams County Open Space Grant Funds. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Mr. Gibson, is anybody registered to speak on this item?
Mayor Hughesman, no members of the public registered to speak on this item.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2369. Councilmember Hurst.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2369. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, Mr. Gibson, would you please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Ordinance 2369, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Adams County Open Space Grant Funds in the amount of $1.5 million for the Buffalo Run Golf Course irrigation system and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Your vote is now open.
Motion carries unanimously, 9-0. Lastly, we have ordinance 2380, an emergency ordinance amending code to prohibit use of ATVs on park property. We'll invite Matt Hayter, interim city attorney, to introduce the item.
This is ordinance 2380, an emergency ordinance amending sections 11-2100 and 7-1003 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to amend the definition of all-terrain vehicle, to expressly prohibit the use of all-terrain vehicles on park property and establish a minimum fine for the unlawful use of all-terrain vehicles and motorcycles on park property and open space. This was a amendment that I was prepared at the request of the mayor. There's a council communication involved, and there's really kind of simple changes to the code that I'd be happy to walk through if requested.
Does anybody on council have any questions for staff? Councilmember Hurst?
I don't really care who answers this one. It could even be you, Mayor. Can we just discuss real quickly in public why this is important? I think I know, but I just want to make sure it's out there.
I'll take that one. We are constantly getting complaints about people using ATVs and even full-scale vehicles in some of the open spaces, specifically around River Run. Also in the Second Creek open space, they're tearing it up. The city put out signs telling people that ATVs are not permitted out there, and the signs have been removed by the individuals who are using the open space for the purpose of using their ATVs. And so this ordinance is proposed as a means of giving our police department teeth and the ability to go out and enforce the policy and make sure that these open spaces are available for everybody and safe to use for people who want to use them, to include kids on bicycles, walking, things of that nature, and not have to worry about being run over by someone on a motorbike or an ATV or in a Razor or even in a Jeep Cherokee. Councilmember Noble?
I'm looking at it and I'm wondering why it's an emergency ordinance to start with. That's my first question. Instead of a normal ordinance.
It was drafted as an emergency ordinance. It was supposed to be heard last week. The purpose behind that was so it could go into effect immediately instead of having to go through the process of a meeting on the 7th, followed by a meeting on the 2nd of April, followed by the published period of 14 days after that. So we'd be looking approximately on a normal ordinance, you're looking 5 to 6 weeks for it to go into effect. This would allow it to go into effect immediately.
Then does motorcycle also include dirt bikes?
Yes.
Yes, it would.
And when you talk about park property, does that include the parking lots?
Park property as defined in the land development code, in the municipal code. I'm thinking about that. I think I need to do it real quick. Is look at that. If you can give me just one moment to look up that section of the code, just to give you, make sure I'm giving you the correct answer.
While you look that up, I'll let Councilmember Hurst ask his question.
Yeah, I think that I'm tagging on. I think e-bikes are becoming very popular, and I think they should still be allowed. I just don't know where we draw the line between an e-bicycle that has a electric powered motor and a motorcycle, and I would like to have that clarified. If we're gonna allow e-bikes, as I think we should, I just want to make that clear because I think people will try to exploit that if we don't.
As it sits right now, I believe the city attorney drafted it to where if it had greater than a 49cc engine, and so an e-bike would be exempted from that because e-bike does not have an internal combustion engine greater than 49 cc's.
That's correct. I'd also note that you could expect at some point to have the model traffic code that was last adopted in 2020 to come before you. Right now, we're operating off the 2010 model traffic code. And the 2020 does take into account things like e-bikes when they're in ways that are, were not anticipated in 2010, of course. So those are things that you would expect to see before you at some point in the future that hopefully would address concerns and issues with e-bikes as well.
Yeah, thanks. I've seen some of the stuff with scooters and stuff, so I think that's a good thing for us to take on.
So our definition of park property, Councilmember Noble, as used in the code at section 7-1001, park property means any and all public recreation lands, waters or facilities owned, leased, or operated by the city, including but not limited to all city parks, trails, open space, and all recreation facilities, and the Buffalo Run Golf Course. Because it says waters or facilities, I would include parking lots in the facilities owned by the city. So I would say, yes, this includes parking lots.
It does.
Yes.
So theoretically, we don't want to include parking lots because people will drive their motorcycles to the park in order to recreate.
I don't know if that's a question for me or if that's a question for your discussion.
I think we should clarify that it doesn't include parking lots so that people can drive certain vehicles into the parking lot in order to go into the parkland or the open space to do whatever it is that they want to do, walk, play ball.
Councilmember Grimes?
Wouldn't that be covered just in like the allowance of regular traffic law that you can drive a motorcycle to a parking lot? Or street legal, yeah, however you want to say it. I think that one's to Mr. Hayter.
So I don't really know the answer to that question. I think, when I'm looking back at this, we have the current prohibition on motorized vehicles on park property does not seem to contemplate there'd be an issue with parking lots. Because, we have this prohibition that basically has a broad kind of definition of what types of motorized vehicles are not supposed to be there. And it says, it also prohibits parking on or adjacent to parks. So I'm kind of looking back through what's specifically in here. It says it's unlawful to park any motorized vehicle or trailer, whether attended or unattended, when the owner operator is not using the park property, on park property between certain hours, and then where it's posted. So, in that context, this contemplates that those vehicles would be able to be lawfully in the parking lot. But again,
Let me
if you're leaving some of these vehicles behind to go recreate in the park, then it could be interpreted as a something that would be a violation. And because this was drafted to add an additional minimum a minimum $1,000 fine for violations, it seems to me that what you'd want to be doing potentially is considering possibly an amendment on the prohibition to exclude parking lots.
Exhibit B takes care of that, I believe.
It does say where specifically authorized by law. Presumptively, a parking lot is authorized, but specifically authorized means, in my mind, you'd have to have an express authorization to have something parked there, like something that specifically says that is allowed.
So when it says, or within any park property except as expressly provided in subsection 11-2100 of this code, that would not cover us?
Well, 11-2100 is the other section that we were revising. And I don't think that covers you, no.
How about a motion to continue this one until next week, and then we can get all that clarified and address it then? Councilmember Madera?
Did you just make that motion?
Sure.
Okay, I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to continue emergency ordinance 2380 until March 21st. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Yes, sir.
So so based on that, it's my understanding that you want to make sure that these vehicles will be parked lawfully in parking lots and not have to be subject to this fine, correct?
Any street legal vehicle would be able to be ridden to the park and parked at the park, in the parking lot, as we would expect anybody to be able to do. We just want to make sure that the language doesn't infringe on the ability to do that and have to come back to us at a later date for revision.
Thank you.
That concludes all the business we have for the evening. We'll see you next week for our regularly scheduled council meeting. Have a good night and have a good week.